A lot of people think Man of Steel got Superman wrong in one very obvious way. I think that may be the one thing the movie actually understood better than most Superman movies do. Because if someone like Superman really appeared in our world before anyone had a way to stop him, before people were used to heroes, before anyone even knew what he was, what exactly were they supposed to see when they looked at him? To be fair, the criticism is easy to understand. This version of Superman feels heavy, bigger than everyone around him, more like a force than a regular person. That's why so many people say Zack Snyder made him feel too godlike, too serious, too far removed from what Superman is supposed to be. But I think that's where a lot of people stop the discourse too early, because the movie is not accidentally making him feel above humanity. It's showing you what humanity would do if we ever dealt with someone like that. If that's true, then the problem with Man of Steel may not be what the movie did with Superman. It may be what people expected Superman to feel like in the first place. Now, I don't want to take too much of your time. Just give me about 8 to 10 minutes and I'll show you why the one thing people keep saying Man of Steel got wrong might actually be the reason this version of Superman still makes sense the most today. When people say Man of Steel got Superman wrong, what they usually mean is simple. This Superman feels too above everyone else, too hard to connect with, more like an idea than a person you can just relate to. I get that, because this is not the smiling, inspirational Superman most people grew accustomed to. The movie makes him feel strange on purpose, hard to place, hard to read. For a lot of viewers, that immediately feels wrong. But that reaction only makes sense if you ignore the kind of world he's showing up in. This world has never seen anything like him. No public superhero culture, no known weaknesses, no normal way to understand him. So the second he becomes visible, he becomes a global problem overnight. Governments want answers, the military wants control. The whole planet is forced to think about him at the same time. Nobody knows what he is. Nobody knows if he can be stopped. And there is no kryptonite. So, of course, people are not going to look at him like he's just a good man in a cape. They are going to look at him like something impossible just stepped into human history. Once you accept that, the movie starts making a very different kind of sense. Because then the question is no longer, why does Superman feel above everyone else? The question becomes, if he really is that powerful, what keeps him from becoming the thing people are afraid of? And that's where the movie makes its most important choice. The point is not just that Clark is powerful, it's that he was raised to hold that power back. From the time he is a kid, the movie shows you that his powers don't make him feel free. They also make him feel different. Overwhelmed, isolated. Martha teaches him how to calm down, how to stay in control. Jonathan takes that further. After the bus rescue, he makes Clark understand that once the world sees him, people are going to fear him, study him, and try to define him before he even gets the chance to define himself. That is a huge part of why this version works for me. Man of Steel is not building a Superman who grows up thinking power gives him permission. It's building a Superman who grows up learning that power comes with consequences. That brings us to the scene people still argue about the most, Jonathan's death. For a lot of people, that is the moment the movie completely loses them. Clark could have saved him. We all know it. So when Jonathan tells him to not move, and Clark stands there and lets it happen, the reaction is simple. It feels wrong. This doesn't feel like Superman. I'm not gonna pretend this reaction is unreasonable. That scene is supposed to hurt. But I think people stop at the frustration and miss what the movie is doing with it. Jonathan is forcing Clark into the ugliest version of the lesson he has been teaching him the whole time. Once the world sees what you are, everything changes. He's telling Clark that revealing himself is not a small decision, it is the decision. You can still hate the scene. A lot of people do. But if you want to understand what version of Superman this movie is building, you cannot skip it. Then Jor-El gives Clark the other half of the picture. Jonathan teaches caution, Jor-El gives him direction. When Clark learns where he came from, the movie stops being only about fear and secrecy. Jor-El tells him he was sent here for a reason, not to rule people, not to stand above them just because he can, but to become a bridge between two worlds, to embody the best of both. That's why Jor-El talks about hope. So the movie does have a real Superman idea inside it. It just doesn't hand that version to you right away. I don't think most people were rejecting the movie's logic. I think they were rejecting the feeling. They didn't want Superman to feel this heavy, this guarded, this much like a man the world would fear before it understood. And that's exactly why Zod matters so much. Because once he arrives, the movie has to prove that all of this weight was building towards something real. Once Zod broadcasts to the whole planet, once government starts scrambling, once the military realizes it cannot handle the situation like anything normal, the framing stops feeling exaggerated and starts feeling earned. These are alien beings who can tear through military force and turn the whole planet into a battlefield in hours. Of course, the reaction is panic and fear. That's why the godlike framing works here. Not because the movie wants you to worship Superman, because the scale of the conflict proves that nobody in this world has any normal way to process what they are looking at. This is humanity realizing all at once that it is no longer at the top of the food chain. This is the part that matters most. Superman himself never asked to be treated like a god. The movie shows you a world that reacts to him like he is something above them. But Clark never moves through the story like someone who wants worship, power, or control. He doesn't try to rule people. He doesn't act like the world owes him anything because of what he can do. When he turns himself in, he literally says he's surrendering to mankind. That's not the move of someone trying to place himself above humanity. That's someone trying to protect it, even while knowing it may fear him or turn on him. That's why I think the godlike criticism misses the real distinction. The movie is not saying Clark sees himself as a god. It's saying other people would have no better category for him. That reaction is coming from the world, not from Superman's ego. At that point, the real mismatch is not between Superman and the movie. It's between the movie and the audience's expectation of Superman. Man of Steel asked what Superman would feel like before comfort ever had a chance to settle in, before trust was earned, before the impossible became familiar. That's why I keep coming back to the same point. The movie's biggest so-called mistake may actually be one of its smartest choices. Not because this is the warmest version of Superman, it isn't. Not because this is the easiest version to love, it probably isn't. But because this version takes the idea of Superman seriously in a world that would not know how to deal with him in the first place. So in the end, I don't think the godlike quality in Man of Steel was some misunderstanding of Superman. I think it was the movie's answer to a very simple question. If a man like this really appeared in our world, how would that world actually see him? It would struggle to decide whether he was a savior, a threat, or something too big to understand. That is exactly why this version still makes sense to me. You do not have to think this is your favorite Superman. But I do think the one thing people keep calling a mistake, making Superman feel almost godlike, may actually be the one choice that makes Man of Steel feel more believable now than people were willing to admit back then. Because Superman himself never asked to be treated that way. The world puts that on him. The movie just has the guts to show what that probably would look like. I also made a video on Batman v Superman where I talk about how the movie weakened its central conflict by never fully letting Superman function as a real threat, which makes Batman's victory feel more controlled than hard-won. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any of my future videos. And thank you for watching.